Hey, teacher friends, when it comes to my classroom management strategies, I have 5 that I go to every single time, whether I'm in elementary or secondary, and that is what I'll be sharing with you in today's video. So stay tuned. Hey, teacher friends, Michelle here. I am a behavior strategist, and I help teachers and schools learn how to manage their students and their classroom with less stress and less struggle. And so today's video, we're talking about my 5 go-to classroom management strategies that I use every single time. They have been a lifesaver for me, and I'm hoping that they will be a lifesaver for you. So let's get started. Number 1, choice time. So choice time is really my incentives and consequences rolled all into one. And it's where I designate a time in my school day, whether it's every day, every week, twice a month, where students can choose an activity to participate in, and usually it's non-academic, for a designated amount of time. So from me, as low as 7 minutes, as high as 30 minutes, depending on the season of the year, the need of the student. And so they can choose activities in the classroom. So I do things like computer time, art time, social time, board game time. I have reading club, and I take input from my students as well as things that I have in hand in the classroom. And I say to them, at a designated time, you can participate in this choice. And when they walk into the classroom, they already have the time that is given. And based on their behavior choices, they can owe time where they will lose out on that choice time activity or parts of the choice time activity. And so this has really been a great strategy because it's free, it's cheap, I can be consistent with it, and it's really based on student choices. So it's been awesome for me. My next go-to strategy is if then. Okay, so if then is really more of a proactive planning strategy that I use. And it really started from me being in the classroom and being stumped in terms of what to do next. And I realized I really didn't have a plan for some common behaviors that were happening in my classroom. But I started using if then. So if a student does a certain behavior, then what are my options? What can I do? And it really helped me to take a look at my classroom management system, to look at my hierarchy of rewards and consequences, to look at also how I can respond when certain behaviors show up. So if then is really a planning tool that I take time to think about, plan for. If a student does a certain behavior, what can I do in response? Strategy number 3 is redirection responses. For so long, I was a correction queen in my classroom, and I spent a lot of time telling my students what they were doing was wrong. There was a mind shift that came in place where I started to say, what if I start telling them what I want them to do instead? So I didn't even address per se or speak on the misbehavior I was seeing. I was speaking on the behavior I wanted to see. And as I began to do that over time, I saw a culture shift change in my classrooms where it was much more positive, and I saw students actually doing the things I was redirecting them to do. Mind blown. Free, cheap, easy. Redirection responses. So key. Strategy number 4, and that is class meetings. So it became apparent to me that a lot of my students didn't have the social skills or the behavior skills. They had a very different point of view than what I had, and I needed to be able to communicate that to them. And so I began to have class meetings. Now, in your schools, you may have morning meetings. For certain grade levels, they have circle time. That is a class meeting, or you can use it as a class meeting. And these were times where I began to talk about behaviors I wanted to see in the classroom, and we would discuss and review what that could look like, sound like, feel like. Sometimes I would allow students to model, or I would model, what that would look like, sound like, feel like. And so it was a time where we would get together as a class and talk about the state of the class. Like what's going on, what's going well, what's not going well, how we can improve, and even some target behaviors that we're going to target for the next couple of weeks or the month. So class meetings, so very important. And that is one of my oh my gosh, one of the best things I've ever brought into how I manage students. And number 5, class jobs. Like a lot of teachers use class jobs and they can, I believe, testify just on the goodness of what they are. But class jobs to me are an opportunity for students to practice social skills and academic skills, depending on the job, right? And so I also have used it to feed the behavior need of a student. So if a student is looking for power and control, I have found that by giving them a responsibility that they can take ownership of, it kind of feeds that need and makes their need to misbehave to get power and control less of an issue. I've also used classroom jobs to help build student confidence. I've used classroom jobs to shift the culture of the classroom from an individual me to a collective, let's do this together, us kind of mindset. And so there are so many values to classroom jobs. But a great tip I got from a teacher earlier this year was to change the word from jobs to leaders. And she said when she changed it to leaders, it really shifted some things because her students were like, I don't want a job, but boy, do they want to lead. And so decide what works best for your classroom. You know how unique your classroom is and your students are, but look into maybe changing the word to leaders if that increases their desire for engagement and participation. So here are my top 5 go-to classroom management strategies that I use in elementary and in secondary. Number 1 is choice time. And by the way, if they're secondary, I don't call it choice time. I call it break time, or I use the mascot, right? Number 2 is if-then planning. So I plan for if a student does a certain behavior, this is how I can respond. So I know my options ahead of time. Number 3, redirection responses. So instead of telling students what they're not doing right, I tell them what I want to see. And that shifts the culture and their mindset. Number 4, class meetings. It gives me an opportunity to share the state of the classroom, but also it gives students an opportunity to speak and be heard. And number 5, class jobs or class leaders. This is an invitation to bring your students into ownership and responsibility of their classroom. And it can help shift so many things: student confidence, the class culture, a feeling of responsibility, and some empowerment. So there are so many things that come with that. So those are my top 5 strategies. What are your top 5? I would love to hear it in the comments below. I will see you next time. Take care.